Good afternoon, or is it morning, afternoon? I'm not sure. Afternoon. Today is March 28th. Welcome to the bill hearings for the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you, senators, for rushing over. We know you just got out, but as you know, everybody is leaving for this game. So that is why we had to move our hearings up. Senate Bill 14, Senator Jackson.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. It's great to be here. Always great to be back in the House. Madam Chair, for the record, Senator Michael Jackson, District 27, on behalf of Senate Bill 14. Senate Bill 14, Madam Chair, is a direct cross-file of House Bill 1281 that you all passed out of here unanimously, and we would ask for a favorable report. I'll stand for question.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this bill have an excellent cross-file?
A super excellent cross-filer.
Thank you.
I don't know. That's kind of iffy. Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Jackson.
Thank you all.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 14.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Senator Alonzo Washington, back to back. Senate Bill 516.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the great House Ways and Means Committee. Glad to be here. Senator Alonzo Washington to present on Senate Bill 516. Great bill. You already heard this bill before, so I won't go in length of what it does. It does create a commission on the Maryland Aerospace and Technology Commission. We amended the bill drastically. It came in with a fiscal note of $5 million. We amended it to make sure that it now goes under one of the departments here. And made sure that we got rid of the fund, we got rid of a lot of stuff, and now it's a commission within the department. And so we also have an amendment. Amendment just makes sure that we add the University of Maryland College Park back into the commission, so they are part of this discussion. And essentially, we have NASA here in the state of Maryland. We don't really know that when you come here, but NASA is big, and aerospace and engineering is big here in Maryland, and we have the most aerospace engineers in the country here in the state of Maryland. And we did add in St. Mary's as well, and a few others. And so I think this is a really great bill. The fiscal note is very small. It's been approved by both budget committees in the House and in the Senate. And I urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Washington, any questions? Senator Hornberger, my bad.
Hey, I'm coming over, baby.
Hey.
Coming over.
Delegate
Yes.
Hornberger.
Okay, love this bill. However, I just wanted to point out, as I've worked in aerospace engineering for a little while, they work hand in hand with materials engineers. Is there going to be any representation from material engineering sector?
I don't know if we didn't specify which engineers should be on
Okay,
there.
gotcha.
So I think we're going to make sure that they all are.
Okay, I
included.
hope this bill flies high. Thank you.
Me too, sir.
Oh, geez.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much,
Thank
Senator.
you.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 516. Senator Kramer, Senate Bill 822.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. Ben Kramer introducing Senate Bill 822. Colleagues, this bill will hopefully seem a little bit familiar. It passed out of the Senate unanimously both last year and again this year. And I'm hoping we get a vote on it this year in the committee, Madam Chair. It's a good bill that simply provides an income tax subtraction modification of up to $5,000 of income earned by a state law enforcement officer if the officer resides in a political subdivision that exceeds the state's crime rate. This bill is a win-win for everybody. We are doing this now for many law enforcement officers, both local as well as at the state level, but not all of them. In particular, the Maryland State Police are not able to avail themselves of this opportunity at a point in time when we're concerned about, and the Washington Post documented last week in an article they ran, very high concerns from the public about crime. This would encourage our state police to reside in an area where crime is particularly high, and to benefit through the subtraction modification if they choose to do so. So when we're looking to retain and recruit, very, very small opportunity to help with that, Madam Chair. So happy to take any questions. I'm guessing we're not going to have the extensive conversation we had last year about this good bill, but it's always a pleasure to be here, Madam Chair.
The shade, Kramer, the shade. There are no questions for you, Senator. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always a pleasure. Good to see you all.
You too. That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 822. Senator Elfreth, Senate Bill 784.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senator Sarah Elfreth here to present Senate Bill 784, which is very much in concept like House Bill 935 presented from Delegate American North. We worked very closely on this bill. The genesis of it really was the General Assembly working with our trauma system from the beginning over the last year to make sure we are shoring up all of the resources that they need to address emergencies across the state. And so this idea really came from our trauma physicians from across the state who have seen an uptick in gunshot wounds, and the complexity of those cases for our first responders and those trauma systems are pretty remarkable. And so Delegate American North and I decided to do something about it in terms of addressing it from the point of sale of guns and ammunition. The bills introduced had an excise tax, 11% excise tax on top of the 6% sales tax. The bill is amended and the Senate changes that to an 11% sales tax. That's not in addition to the 6%. It's 11% altogether. And then has the same allocation of the funds that are in the House bill. So that's 44% of the revenue generated to the Trauma Physicians Fund. That goes to all the trauma centers across the state, 29% to shock trauma at University of Maryland Medical System, 23% to violence intervention and prevention program, 2% to the Survivors of Homicide Victims Grant Program, 2% to the Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention. And the Senate also did create an exemption for active duty military, current and retired law enforcement officers as well. That was at the request of the FOP, and the Budget and Taxation Committee carved out that amendment for them. Couple quick points, Madam Chair, some issues that came up on the Senate floor, for instance. I want to remind everybody that unless a gun is a ghost gun or a 3D printed gun, every single gun used in the commission of violence, either accidental or intentional, originated at a point of sale somewhere. And so that's really the basis of the argument here, is that we need to ensure that the violence that has been created is we at least help pay for the aftermath of that. And again, the intervention of that from the beginning, which is why the waterfall of where the fund goes is outlaid in the bill. Also want to point out that there's also a shocking amount of guns used in attempted and successful suicides. That this also really does get to the heart of, again, funding our trauma system. And folks are familiar with the fact that if you are to get to shock trauma in Baltimore, because of our system from start to finish, our EMS, our state police, our helicopters, and the trauma, shock trauma, you have an incredibly high rate of surviving. And that's exactly why we need to make sure that we are, that those systems are sustainable for generations to come. And I expect many questions on this bill, Madam Chair, and I'm after those questions, ask for a favorable committee report.
Okay, we'll start with Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I first heard about this, I started shaking my head because, you know, a lawful gun owner that buys weapons lawfully, make sure they're locked up and they're secured, and same way with their ammunition, that you're going to be well, this bill will require us to pay an excise tax because of some bad actors that, I'm just going to say, on the most part, shock trauma, some of the bad actors are shooting at one another.
Delegate, respectfully, and I do appreciate the question. The Senate bill is not an excise tax. It is a sales tax.
Okay.
I would also again suggest that unless something is a 3D printed gun, almost every gun used in, again, an accident or an intentional incident of violence at some point was purchased or stolen from a firearms dealer. So they got into the system somehow, and it's important that that point of sale goes to fund the violence intervention programs I discussed and the trauma system that is responsible for saving lives afterwards. Madam Chair, I would also suggest this is very similar to how we fund our trauma system elsewhere. Folks are familiar, we fund it primarily through the vehicle registration we all pay every 2 years. I have a car, many folks in this room have a car. None of us intend to get in an accident or cause an accident with those vehicles. God forbid if I do, I am assured that the money I pay in my vehicle registration every year has gone to shoring up the best trauma system in the world. I don't intend to get in an accident or cause an accident, but I know that if I do, the money I paid into that system is there. This is the same way. No gun owner, I'm sure, intends to use that gun for an act of violence or an accident, but accidents do happen. I have a lot of statistics in front of me about various acts of violence across the state, many of which were caused by an owner, or the gun in some way started with a legal purchase, but still resulted in violence that our trauma system is then responsible for addressing. So all the bill does is same logic that flows from our vehicle registration. We're just assigning it to guns in this case.
I guess the last question is, you're talking about guns that are stolen from legal gun owners. Most of the crimes, do you have any statistics showing how many are rushed to shock trauma from stolen guns?
We don't have that right now. This legislature passed to the state police, the Center for Firearm Safety, that is still being stood up. We're about 18 months away from that database being something that we could look to as a General Assembly. So that data at the moment is currently not collected. I have a number of incidents in front of me of acts of gun violence in Maryland, many of which made the headlines, some of them in my own district right here, where the guns were legally purchased and used in that act of violence. So I think it's a misnomer, Delegate, to suggest that every act of gun violence was used by a gun illegally possessed. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Regardless, at some point, unless it is a 3D printed gun, that gun originated through a point of sale.
Well, I know that Dr. Scalia, I actually visited shock trauma, went into the helicopter they landed on there. Anyway, we visited shock trauma. One of the things he said publicly, he's getting tired of patching the same people up again and again. Now, that's where this all comes from. We have to do something about violent offenders that keep using stolen guns. And I really believe that if we made having a stolen gun in your possession is a felony, that we've tried to get past, and we can't get past the hurdle. We need to definitely stop crime. I believe this is going to only hurt people that hunt. A lot of hunters, a lot of young people hunt, and it's going to start taxing them on rifles and shells. Now that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Delegate Buckle. Next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Never said that to you sitting there before. Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator. So I appreciate the fact, I just want to clarify, the excise tax caused a lot of issues because there was a thought that it could actually lead to triple taxation because you're taxing the FFLs at differing levels of the transaction flow. So you've taken all that out. It's just basically like, you're going and you buy a product, most products in the state of Maryland, 6%, just going to be 11% for these particular products. My understanding, you're on the Budget and Tax Committee, so I'm sure you have a pretty good understanding of how we're trying to fund some of these shock trauma needs.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone wants to fund shock trauma more money because they're vital for regardless of how you get there. You're holding someone's life and their family's lives in your hands. My understanding is that the House mechanism that has been passed would fund shock trauma, would fund the needs of shock trauma, at least the needs as outlined today. Everybody could always use more, but it's the needs that they're seeking. We would be able to fund those needs without this bill. Is that your understanding?
I don't have the House's number off the top of my head. The Senate has a similar bill separate from the Bertha that we've passed that does direct funding to shock trauma. I would only suggest, though, in the same vein that we use the vehicle registration as the, no pun intended, vehicle to fund shock trauma, it's because when we started this discussion over 40 years ago to find a mechanism, the leading cause of people presenting to emergency departments was vehicle collisions. Today, it's actually falls, mostly seniors falling, then vehicle collisions, and then soon after are the uptick in gunshot wounds that we've seen. And Dr. Scalia, I believe, testified to this committee just in the last 10 years, the increase in gunshot wounds he's treating at shock trauma alone, there has been an uptick. So again, just following the same logic.
And I appreciate that. Do you have any, I mean, I guess the point of attenuation is the intervening cause. I think that's what Delegate Long was getting at. You're correct. Some people try to commit suicide and they're unsuccessful, but they shoot themselves and they need treatment. Some people do have an accidental firearms discharge, but many cases, I don't have the statistic, but I would suggest from the testimony we heard on the bill originally, the overwhelming majority of them are someone's intentional and likely criminal, therefore act. Unless you're a law enforcement officer in the self-defense of yourself or others, no one has a right to shoot a gun at someone else. And so the intervening cause, does that give you any pause about we're going to place a tax upon something, understanding designed or directed to pay for shock trauma? But understanding that the shock trauma cases are largely, a significant majority of them are coming from the use of that product illegally.
So again, we don't have those statistics. I hope we can have them in 18 months when the state police have that database up and running. Again, at some point, that gun was legally purchased. And let me just give you a couple of examples, though, of legally purchased and legally possessed guns that were used in a crime of violence that resulted in people needing to utilize the trauma system. Right here in the city of Annapolis, just down the street, the Capitol Gazette shooting in 2018, 5 people lost their lives and a number of people were injured. That was a legally purchased and owned shotgun in that circumstance. Delegate Henson knows that our community also experienced a tragedy earlier in June of a triple homicide. In that case, again, legally purchased gun of the individual accused of that crime. The Howard County Deputy Sheriff that lost his life in Baltimore City just a few months ago, that again, he was the victim of somebody who legally possessed that gun. I can go on and on with various examples. 80%, for example, of school shootings in the country, including the one in St. Mary's County just a few years ago, that was a legally purchased gun, in that case, improperly stored because there was a minor in the home that was used in that act of violence.
But it was legally purchased, but illegally used. And so we all understand what the Second Amendment is. We all understand that the Supreme Court of the United States has said you cannot unduly infringe upon the Second Amendment. As policymakers, many, probably including yourself, and that's my friend, there's no castigation to that, would like for that law to likely be different. I think policymakers, not myself personally, but a lot of people here would like to say, gee, we don't want that interpretation of the Second Amendment. We'd like to be able to crack down on gun proliferation much more significantly. Fact of the matter is we can't. We keep trying here in Maryland. We do things, other states do them, and they are routinely struck down. Do you have any concerns that placing this type of tax with this type of sort of legislative record as to why we're doing it will result in legal challenges and may in fact under Bruin and other precedents be taken out? And then that's my next to last question. Is one other quick one, but I just wanted to get your thoughts.
Sure. Well, Delegate, you're the attorney, so I am not, but I have spoken to our Attorney General. The Chair Smith has also been very helpful in this effort. I've no illusions to the fact that this will be challenged probably on implementation day. But we do feel like this path has precedent and will sustain that challenge.
And that's why kind of just systemically, that's why I like the other mechanism to fund shock trauma. I don't want shock trauma to be sitting there and go a year or 2 years or 3 years without the funds to do what they want to do, because we're having a legal challenge all the way to the Fourth Circuit or the Supreme Court or wherever it goes about the legality of the bill. And that's why I asked the question about, do we have another mechanism to basically pay for what we all want without doing this bill? My final question is, the reality is, I mean, a lot of people who own you know, if we want to call them gun stores, hunting stores, stores that provide guns and ammunition. Some places sell guns. Some places just sell ammunition. Some large retailers are like, we don't sell guns here, but we do sell ammunition. And then we treat it a little bit, you know, a little bit differently with respect to some things. But we live so close to other places. So when you say these guns are lawfully purchased, it would be very easy where I live. You live kind of in the center of the state, so it's a little harder to get to other states from here in Anne Arundel County. But for most of us, we live within minutes in driving distance, half an hour, 30, 40 minutes to other states. And so what will happen under your system when someone goes into Virginia or Pennsylvania to purchase, say, ammunition? They can go, so like if I'm a hunter or I just want to purchase ammunition for sport shooting, I wouldn't tell anyone in Allegheny County to buy it in Allegheny County if the rate's 11%, when you can be in West Virginia or Pennsylvania in 10 minutes. That ammunition doesn't have to be sold back to an FFL.
No.
So they can just go buy all the ammunition that they want, drive it over the state line, utilize it. They're not going to pay the tax. Do you think that creates a competitive imbalance for those retail organizations in Maryland who get a percentage of their income from ammunition sales?
It's a excellent question, Delegate. I would say that Delaware was zero sales tax. We experience the same thing on the Eastern Shore. So I think it's a choice that we make in this body very often when we talk about tax policy.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here to answer the questions. Unfortunately, being behind Delegate Buckle, many of the questions are already asked and answered, but thank you for recognizing Delaware next to Worcester County. Certainly pushes a lot of people to purchase elsewhere and not support our local businesses. But my question, you mentioned shock trauma, receiving the funding from this. Is it only the one shock trauma center, or is it going to be dispersed to the regional and rural shock trauma centers?
I appreciate that question, and thank you for allowing me to clarify. The bill is introduced in the Senate bill that you have in front of you has what we call a waterfall of funding. So regardless of the level of funding or revenue this takes in, the following will be funded in the following percentages: 44% to shock trauma, because that is what they call the hub of the wheel, where they take on the worst of the worst cases in all circumstances. So if your trauma center on the Eastern Shore can't help somebody, they would be then medevac to shock trauma in Baltimore. So 44% to the hub, 29%, I'm sorry, I misspoke, 44% to the Trauma Physicians Fund, which is all the trauma centers, including the one on the Eastern Shore, 29% to shock trauma, 23% to violence interruption and prevention, 2% to survivors of homicide, 2% to Center for Firearm Violence and Prevention. So I don't think anybody would suggest that an increase in the sales tax here would prevent gunshot wounds, but we are saying some of the funding generated would go to proven programs that do have success in interrupting and intervening in gun violence. And so that's why it's important. It's both the trauma system between the shock trauma and the Physicians Fund and violence intervention and interruption programs.
So the 44%, we don't know how that's going to break down from there as far as if anything would trickle. I think on the Eastern Shore, the trauma center there is maybe 1.5% gunshot wounds versus, was it 10 or 11% at shock trauma in Baltimore? The concern though, to have those services there, there's much standby time. Our trauma center is not as busy, but you have all the standby because of all the specialties that are needed to have a shock trauma center.
Right.
So it's actually more expensive for us in a rural atmosphere to operate a shock trauma. And as you know, you can't always fly a helicopter because of weather and so forth. So for many Marylanders across the state vacationing in Worcester County and so forth, our shock trauma center is very important to the entire state,
right?
But yet continue to be overlooked as far as its role in shock trauma. And
well, that's exactly why we are ensuring that the Trauma Physicians Fund that does support your trauma system has the money it needs to function. And I sat on the commission with Delegate Shetty and heard from all of our trauma centers about the unique challenges. And you certainly have a unique challenge on the shore of needing those standby physicians, and we're opening it up to nurses as well, that others might not have. I would say though, Delegate, that there is still gun violence in every community across the state. And I don't know why the CDC breaks this down by congressional district, but it does. The first congressional district is the leader in Maryland in terms of guns used in the attempt or success of a suicide. And so there's gun either directed at oneself or directed at another. There's gun violence across the state in every corner.
But you don't know exactly what it would mean for the other centers as far as percentages.
This bill doesn't go so far. It would be broken down. The way that it works is it's reimbursable costs. So what
Unfortunately, though, that standby and everything isn't reimbursable. So you've answered my question. Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then I'll pose the same question we did on the House sponsor. Because the bill has been heavily amended, want to get a different take on it. So in terms of the mechanics, I of course live in Cecil County and travel to Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia gun shows. If I purchase the firearm in an adjacent state, there is a waiting period associated with that firearm. It is delivered to a gun broker or dealer in Maryland. There's usually a fee associated with that. After the waiting period is over and all the paperwork has been filled out, I can go pick up said firearm. So my question is, the transaction took place out of state. However, the transfer fee took place in Maryland. So under that circumstance and that scenario, this bill wouldn't assess any taxes on that transaction, be it the purchase of the firearm and the transfer fee, because I don't see the transfer fee outlined here.
It's an excellent question. I don't know if I have an answer for you. I'm happy to ask the comptroller's office for their thoughts on this.
Okay. And then the second question is, I can purchase ammunition via catalog or online and have it delivered to my home. Would the website or whatever company that I'm ordering it from, would the onus be on them to accept the 11% and remit it to the state?
It would be, and it's an excellent question, and an important caveat for this being a sales and not an excise tax is that the Wayfair decision that I know this committee is very familiar with to capture out of state sales tax would apply here. So yes.
Okay. And then the third question is, if I have a transaction that is person to person, so I want to sell Delegate Buckle a shotgun, and we agree on a cash price. We still have to utilize a gun broker or gun dealer to do the transfer. Would myself or Delegate Buckle be responsible for remitting the 11% to the state?
Again, I think that's a question I'm happy to ask the comptroller and then provide this committee with an answer for.
Okay,
thank you. Madam Chair, just to Delegate Hartman's question about the standby costs, the Senate's version of the trauma bill actually adjusts and fixes the standby costs that were flagged by your trauma center. So that's a different bill, but we've tried to hear the concerns from your trauma center and we have adjusted for it in the other trauma bill. Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger, I believe the answer to your first question is when that gun is transferred to the FFL here, that tax will be paid, but not on the fee, not on that $30 or $40 fee, but the sales tax will be paid here. I'm pretty certain that's how it is.
Thank you. The purchase wasn't made in the state of Maryland.
They would pay the tax here. That's my understanding how it works, how it's going to work. Delegate Miller.
Yeah, if we could.
Yep, we'll ask the comptroller for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we all come and represent different areas of the state. One of the things that causes a lot of collisions out in Frederick County is deer. And as a matter of fact, between 2006 and 2018, we were ranked 6th in the nation as far as the amount of deer collisions that we have. So one of the things that reduces our amount of deer collisions is harvesting them and hunting. And so we do a lot of hunting. So what do you think like an increased tax on that would have an impact on? Because then if you decrease the amount of deer, you're going to decrease the amount of collisions, which would hopefully decrease the amount of visits to shock trauma from accidents and having
Thank you for that question. I can't speak to its impact. I will say you just heard a bill last week in this committee to provide a tax credit for the donation of antlerless deer that are harvested to our food bank. So that's one policy answer. And I share similar concerns. We have overpopulation of deer in Anne Arundel County as well. And the cost to crop damage for our farmers and collisions is pretty high. I think we have other answers on the table to help with that. We passed a bill last year. I was proud to be the sponsor of it again, to increase the funds for training for young hunters and hunters of different backgrounds to try to increase participation in that field for the exact reason you mentioned, which is we need to limit the deer population in the state.
Well, I'm glad you said that about training. So would you consider an amendment to exempt some of our agricultural communities or agricultural use for as far as especially for mitigating crop damage and things like that? Because yes, an 11% increased tax on all of the things that are listed are definitely going to impact those communities. So, I mean, I think that would be a pretty good amendment to exempt the agricultural communities from that tax.
I think we'd probably want to be a little more specific in that, but it would be up to the wisdom of this committee.
Happy to work on that. The other thing is protection. So again, in our area of the county, as my husband and I received a picture this week of a very, very large bear from one of our trail cams going through our property. So it's very important to us as far as protection and things like that. As far as being able to practice, being able to have guns, being able to purchase guns and being able to have them for literal protection on our property. So any thoughts on that as far as in other areas, as far as protection, again, because we all represent different areas of the state?
Yes, we do. I have no thoughts beyond leaving that to the wisdom of the committee, but I would suggest, and DNR publishes this every year, the number of well, thank God we have not had a death related to hunting, accidental death in 40 or so years. Every year we do see accidents, including ones with shotguns and other guns in hunting. DNR published it just last year. A 59-year-old in Talbot County was deer hunting and shot by another hunter. That person, would have utilized the trauma system. And 2023, a 38-year-old in Washington County, deer hunter shot himself in the foot with his rifle. So there are accidents similar to other incidents of gun violence as well that would still ensure this would ensure that the aftermath of those accidents would be treated by this bill.
And there's also, we can list, there's bear attacks that happen and that send people actually to shock trauma or kill them in my county. So the other point then is domestic abuse, concealed carry permit. I want somebody who's been a victim of domestic abuse to be able to practice and be able to be very proficient with her handgun. And I wouldn't want anything to impede her access or her financial ability to protect herself. So that's another concern that I have with it. And then the other, we had
Do
some
we have any questions?
Yeah, so
Miller?
young women that any exemption for sports shooting or anything like that. There are women that young women that we had 2 young children that actually do competitive sports. So is there any consideration for youth, competitive sports, training, anything like that?
Well, the Senate bill is now in the good hands of this committee. And so I would leave it to this committee to decide.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Delegate Long, did you have another question?
Do you have any data as far as how much revenue this will generate?
Thank you, Delegate. The updated fiscal note per the change from excise tax to sales tax estimates 10.2 million in fiscal 26 and moving up to 11.4 million in fiscal 29.
Okay, one gun store that I talked to, they said it would cost an additional taxes over $400,000. One store, and he's very concerned because I don't want to mention the name, but there's a practicing range there. And it's going to hinder his business because you're going to have to pay taxes on ammunition to practice with. And, I just wanted to point that out. It was like $400,000, one gun store.
Any you have a question?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, isn't that so? I will just ask Senator Elfreth, since domestic violence was brought up, I serve on the Maryland Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team. And would you be surprised to learn that in the statistics show in 2020, 2021, in all of the fatalities, intimate partner violence fatalities here in the state of Maryland, guns were used 100% of the time.
Would not surprise me at all.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
On Senate Bill 784. Senator Klausmeyer, Senate Bill 878. Welcome, Shadow.
Haley. So, Senate Bill 878, gaming, problem gambling, prevalence study and fund revenue. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the wonderful House Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 878. Senate Bill 878 is a cross-file to Delegate Allen's House Bill 1029, which had its hearing in the committee in February. In short, this bill is about ensuring that our state has resources available to provide education, peer support, and treatment regarding problem gambling. As amended by the Senate, Senate Bill 878 has three main components. First, the bill will divert 1% of revenues from operators of sports wagering and daily fantasy sports to the problem gambling fund. Second, the bill requires the Department of Health to conduct a prevalence study on problem mobile gaming in Maryland. And third, the bill requires MDH to submit a report on how the funds in the problem gambling funds are expended. And I just want to say that I've been tracking problem gambling for quite some time, and it is, as we have gotten more ways to gamble, it gets worse and worse. So I really hope that you'll pass this bill to help those who have problem gambling. And it could be anybody you know, and you really can't tell, because in other kind of addictions, there's certain things that stand out, but a problem gambler sometimes just could look just like anybody in this room. So
Thank you.
Look forward to a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Senator Klausmeyer. That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 878. Senator Zucker, Senate Bill 1066.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, distinguished members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Senator Craig Zucker here on the House on Senate Bill 1066, which is the cross-file House Bill 1291. I wanted to thank Delegate Attar for her leadership. Also, I never want to miss the chance to say hello to one of the delegates that I work with, Delegate Bernice Mericu North. And Madam Chair, I also wanted to thank you and your incredible staff. I know that things have been very busy, and you've been very gracious with timing and everything, so thank you. Colleagues, again, you've already heard this bill. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with Vice Chair Wilkins as well to make it a more perfect bill, but happy to answer any questions. You've already had a public hearing on it. We want to make sure this is a consumer protection bill, and again, I just want to value your time, Madam Chair, colleagues.
Sorry, I should have let you go before the last bill.
That's okay.
Didn't know it was going to go that way.
No, that's
Sorry.
okay.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Of course, thank you, Madam Chair.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 1066. We're going to jump around. Senator Antonio Hayes, Senate Bill 1005.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee, Madam Vice Chair, Senator Antonio Hayes for the record. Senate Bill 765 passed the Senate unanimously. I believe it was cross-filed by none other than Senate Delegate Wells, HB 1490. So you've heard this bill, you're familiar with it. Just on behalf of the advocates, just want to say thank you for your consideration. It's a very important bill to create opportunities for greater diversity in the incubator space. And talking with individuals, I think it creates opportunities, especially, you know, as we've made some pretty significant advances in the cannabis community. There, it allows an opportunity for even more diversity in incubators in that way and other things. I will not belabor the point, but Madam Chair, I ask for a favorable report for Senate Bill 765.
And there's a Kristen Pierce. Is she here? No, Ms. Pierce. Okay, well, are there any questions on Senate Bill
Nope.
765? Committee, I would like to first thank our friends from the Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce who came in supporting this bill. And if you have not been in the kitchen, you need to go see what they brought us. You need to go see. So thank you very much for
I
that.
heard.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 765. Senator Hayes, Senate Bill 1005.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of Ways and Means Committee, Senator Antonio Hayes for the record. I'm sponsoring Senate Bill 1005 and its cross-file House Bill 1427 at the advice of the Office of the Attorney General to meet the intent of the General Assembly after we established the state of Maryland's West North Avenue Development Authority as an economic development agency for Baltimore City in 2021. We created the authority to develop a comprehensive plan for West North Avenue and fund the initiate economic housing and transportation projects along the 3-mile roadway. West North Avenue, the second most traveled transit residential commercial corridor in the state with 56 to 61% property vacancies, restraining optimum property income and tax sale revenue collected to the state in Baltimore City. Madam Chair, I urge a favorable report for Senate Bill 1005.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 1005. Senator Hester, Senate Bill 394. And there's Melissa Archer.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's great to be back. You have not yet heard this bill, but you've heard similar bills in the past. Senate Bill 394 will provide alterations to the Catalytic Revitalization Project tax credit. And I'm pleased to be sponsoring this piece of legislation on the behalf of the Department of Housing and Community Development. As you may recall from previous years, the Catalytic Revitalization Tax Credit was created as a critical tool to help promote the adaptive reuse of our state and federal historic properties here in the state. It's now been in use for several years, and we continue to learn about the flexibility of phasing and how that will reduce the financial risks and provide the much needed cash flow to support these complicated redevelopment projects. The bill before you does 5, slightly technical things, which I'll walk through. First, the original legislation required the recipient of the tax credit to claim the credit in 20% increments over a 5-year period. So the bill before you will allow the project that is completed in phases to claim 100% of the value of each phase in the taxable year the final certificate for the phase was issued. The second thing the bill does is it repeals a limitation of the Secretary of Housing and Community Development to award initial and final tax credit certificates for the 5-year projects before a certain date. The third thing is a result of the Smart Growth Subcabinet, which identified 23 historic complexes that would benefit from the credit, but many of them were smaller projects in the $10 to $20 million range. So the third thing the bill does is it repeals the limitation that will allow more of these complexes to participate in the program without exceeding the aggregate credit limit of $15 million. Fourth, the bill authorizes the secretary to revoke an initial credit certificate for a catalytic revitalization project and award the certificate to another applicant under certain conditions. And finally, Senate Bill 783 allows the secretary to issue multiple final tax credit certificates for a project if the project is determined by the secretary to be in phases, and the secretary will adopt regulations concerning these procedures. Finally, as the bill came out of the Budget Taxation Committee, there were two technical amendments and a third amendment that basically prohibited the Secretary of Housing and Community Development from revoking a tax credit certificate issued previously unless the entity stopped the project. So I know that that was highly technical. I just want to remind you that the benefit of this tax credit is that we currently have two state complexes that have received the award, one in Sykesville and one in Fort Ritchie and Cascade. And these will both be transformed, from previously, derelict, unutilized complexes into mixed-use communities that will create jobs, increase the local tax base, and expand housing opportunities. And for these reasons, I ask for your favorable report on Senate Bill 394. Thank you so much.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Melissa Archer. I am the Historic Preservation Officer for the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, and I'm also the staffer that will administer this program. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the project at Fort Ritchie in Washington County. The developer is not here today, but I just wanted to tout what an important and impactful project that is. The developer of Fort Ritchie has an approved plan to complete total redevelopment of a former historic military base over 5 phases. The first phase has been completed and it resulted in the rehabilitation of 58 townhomes, the opening of a cafe, a wedding venue, art gallery, medical clinic, a museum, an ice cream shop, a hair salon, and several manufacturing facilities. All of these were previously vacant buildings, and they've now been put into productive use. This is what we want to see. We want to see more of this, and we want to support these developers and give them the capital they need to transform these former state and federal buildings. The critical thing that this amendment will do, not this amendment, this bill, is providing them access to the full 20% of a credit for a phased project. Fort Ritchie has $16.7 million in private financing that they've invested so far. Currently, under the existing legislation, they only have access to 4% returned as a tax credit rather than 20% because of the phasing required of the claiming the credit. This bill will give them access to $3.3 million to help them complete the next phase, which is rehabilitation of a historic ice house and complete costly infrastructure on the property. So for this reason, we are fully in support of this bill and urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Delegate Flakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Hester, for the bill. I was just trying to read through it really quickly. I just wanted to make sure. So the bill doesn't make any changes to the existing criteria for how projects are selected by DHC. I didn't see anything, but I just wanted to make sure that's not part of the bill.
I don't believe so.
Okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Senator Hester.
Thank you so much.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 394. Senator Carrozza, Senate Bill 897. And we'll check and see if there's a virtual witness. We'll check and see if she's here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the distinguished House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza, and that's District 38, Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset counties. And I first want to thank the House bill sponsor. I'm presenting Senate Bill 897 today to ask for your support. And want to thank the House sponsor, Delegate Wayne Hartman, for his leadership on the House side in moving this forward. This is a very important piece of legislation that specifically is intended to relieve the tax liability on the death benefits of the families of first responders who died in the line of duty, families who are already suffering from the loss of a parent, child, or spouse, families like Tashika Hilliard's, whose husband, Corporal Glenn Hilliard, with the Wycomico County Sheriff's Office, was brutally murdered by a violent offender. You heard earlier the powerful testimony from Tashika Hilliard and the financial stress when she learned that she would be liable for $176,000 tax liability when she received her $500,000 death benefit. So when we learned of this and she brought this to our attention, we had hoped that we would be able to resolve this without legislation. But we do need the legislation to relieve these families, the fallen hero families, of this tax liability. And so the legislation does that, and it also makes it retroactive to beginning taxable years December 31st, 2021, to guarantee that the Hilliard family would not face that tax liability. And I just, on a personal note, and I'm sure Delegate Hartman shares this with me, for Tashika Hilliard, given everything that she's gone through, to come up and personally testify for all of the families of fallen heroes. It was very powerful, very moving, and she really is an inspiration to all of us. So I'm asking for the committee for a swift and favorable approval of Senate Bill 897. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a quick question. I was just looking at the Senate bill and the House bill, which we voted out of the House and sent over to the Senate. It appears there is one small difference. The Senate bill was amended to become an emergency bill. Do I have that correct? That's the only difference between the two bills?
Yeah, on my bill, it was amended to add co-sponsors, but you're talking on the House bill, you amended it.
No, I'm looking at the Senate bill as it arrived over here. There was a language added to be an emergency bill. It appears the House bill was not. I was just confirming that that's the only difference between the two.
Mr. Butler is saying you are correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No.
Thank you, Madam
worries.
Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 897. I just would like to say to my friends from Mom Demand Action, you all missed Senate Bill 784. We started at noon because a lot of individuals will be leaving today to go to the O's game. So we started early, so I apologize. It was a very healthy debate, and I'm sure Delegate Miracu North can brief you on what happened. And it's online also of the hearing, the video recording is online. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so next, Mr. Fallon, come on up. Senate Bill 473.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. For the record, Brad Fallon here on behalf of Governor Moore, here to present Senate Bill 473, the Pavel Lapeyre Legacy of Innovation Act of 2024. Just thank you to the committee for passing House Bill 582, which is in the exact same stature as this bill. So unless there are any questions, I'll just keep this brief and urge the committee to give a favorable report. Thanks so much.
We like that. I know, and there are no questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 473. Mr. Hayes, Senate Bill 675.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thanks for allowing me to be here today to discuss Senate Bill 675, the Stop Scam Preparers Act, which is exactly what we're trying to do with this bill. Building on the foundation laid by the 2017 Taxpayer Protection Act, this bill aims to protect taxpayers in three ways. First, it improves the communication and data sharing practices between the Office of the Comptroller and the Maryland Board of Individual Tax Preparers, which resides with the Department of Labor. Second, this bill aims to protect the tax preparer community by directing the Board of Individual Tax Preparers to develop a code of ethics that tax preparers will be required to comply with in order to get and maintain their registration with the state. And finally, this bill provides the Comptroller's Field Enforcement Bureau with new enforcement powers to charge violators and fine them for each violation. We continue to see too many Marylanders falling victim to scam tax preparers, the consequences of which can create lingering financial issues for people, many of whom may already be experiencing hardship. Thank you for providing the opportunity for my testimony to be heard today. And as this legislation received a favorable report from this committee earlier this session, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 675.
Okay, are there any questions? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 675. Senate Bill 1105, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Justin Hayes. I'm here on behalf of the Comptroller's Office as the Director of State Affairs. And similarly, Senate Bill 1105 was previously given a favorable consideration by this committee. So I won't go through the litany on this one as well, and I'll just ask for favorable report on Senate Bill 1105.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 1105. Is there anyone here from Senator James's office for Senate Bill 781? Is that you, sir? Okay, come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and committee members. I am not from Senator James' office, but I am a board member of the Regional Additive Manufacturing Partnership, Maryland, which was created through Maryland legislation for the purpose of advancing manufacturing technology in northeastern Maryland. With the initial focus being on additive manufacturing, 3D printing, utilizing the expertise and capital equipment of the U.S. Army at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Over the ensuing 10 years, it's been very successful in creating over 250 jobs related to advanced manufacturing, assisting the startup of over 15 new companies and supporting 50 existing companies interested in expanding their advanced manufacturing capabilities. The renaming of the RAMP MD, as we shorthanded, from additive to advanced, is the purpose to clarify and rebrand the effort for the purpose of further expanding the development of advanced manufacturing capability in northeastern Maryland, and even the Mid-Atlantic region, by providing access to the advanced manufacturing capabilities of the Army at Aberdeen Proving Ground, which are quite extensive.
Let me just start. Are you from Senator James's office?
I am from Senator James's office. I thought it was being made.
Okay. Can you please join the gentleman? Yep. And sir, if you could wrap up and then we'll let this gentleman present.
Madam Chair, that's a summary of the intent of and the request from RAMP MD to redesignate in legislation the name change.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cody Arago. I'm a legislative aide for Senator James. Senator James apologized that she couldn't be here. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the chance to speak today on Senate Bill 781. Like I said, Senator James is actually in a work group meeting right now in Judicial Proceedings Committee in the Senate. So I'll be presenting the bill. It'll be very similar to the gentleman to my last testimony before. This is a very simple bill that originated from a recent request from the RAMP MD organization. RAMP MD stands for Regional Additive Manufacturing Partnership of Maryland. RAMP MD is an entity that Senator James helped establish in 2014, and it was modeled after other states that had already leveraged the benefits of having military installations in their borders. RAMP MD allows for the technology transfer from Aberdeen Proving Ground to local businesses to create in-demand skills training and jobs in Harford County and across the region. RAMP MD would like to replace the word additive with the name advanced to more accurately describe the scope of work that RAMP MD does. In addition to being renamed the Regional Advanced Manufacturing Partnership of Maryland, the RAMP MD fund will also be updated to reflect the alteration in name. Furthermore, the bill makes similar changes to the purposes, membership, and duties of RAMP MD to incorporate advanced manufacturing instead of solely additive manufacturing. I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 781, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you both very much. Thank you for coming over.
Thank you, and I apologize for being late again.
Absolutely fine. And that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 781. And to round us out, Delegate Miller for Senator Quarterman on Senate Bills 1076.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and my friends on Ways and Means. I am honored to be here representing Senator Quarterman for Senate Bill 1076, which is the cross file from a bill that we've heard previously in this committee. This legislation requires the comptroller to distribute to the Transportation Trust Fund revenue from the sales and use tax that is attributable to the sale of electricity used to charge an electric vehicle at a public charging station. Allocating these funds to contribute to the Transportation Trust Fund will ensure Maryland's roadways are maintained, repaired, and in safe condition for our constituents. The Budget and Tax Committee did have several differences. They added to the bill that the comptroller shall on or before December 31st of 2024 determine a method of calculating the sales and use tax attributable to the sale of electricity as described, and then distribute the sales and use tax collected under this section in a manner that's consistent with the findings and recommendations of the Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Work Group. So the passage of this bill is then contingent on the passage of House Bill 1028 and Senate Bill 951, which establishes that Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment Work Group. That's it.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Any questions?
They kind of made them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 1076. Committee will be voting at 9 a.m. tomorrow before floor at 10. 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.